but they're not the heavyweight. So the idea that this mid-level South African diplomat when South Africa was a tag-along.
Jim Rickards, an economic commentator and analyst, recently delivered a speech discussing the role and potential impact of the BRICS nations, specifically addressing the context of South Africa's involvement in the group. He examined the potential creation of a new global currency and its potential ties to gold, drawing parallels to historical concepts proposed by John Maynard Keynes at the Bretton Woods Conference. Enjoy the video.
You've got one of the three largest oil producers in the world, Russia. Brazil, landmass, population, GDP, in other respects, is one of the most powerful countries in the world. And so that's a heavyweight club. It may not be, US, UK, France, and Germany, but that's a heavyweight club. How does South Africa get in? They were invited to join a couple of years after the BRICS were formed. It was for political reasons. They were like, well, if we're the emerging markets, and we got South America, Asia, and if you want to count Russia as a European country, to some extent it is, we don't have anybody from Africa. And so let's find somebody. And South Africa is the largest economy in the continent of Africa. So they were invited to join. But South Africa is tiny compared to everything else we're talking about, GDP, population size, et cetera. It doesn't compare really. So it was a favor to them. It was for political reasons to have somebody from Africa, but they're not the heavyweight. So the idea that this mid-level South African diplomat when South Africa was a tag along to the BRICS is going to tell you what the agenda is. I'd rather listen to Sergei Lavrov and others. And the truth is, this is being run by Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. It's being run by Russia and China, and they're going to decide what the agenda is. So let's see what happens in August. I think we have a pretty good idea, but I feel more comfortable relying on what Sergei Lavrov says than on
Lavrov said it's going to happen.
I know. That's my point.
Yeah.
He's a serious guy. He doesn't bluff.
No.
Ask the Ukrainians. He doesn't bluff.
Yeah.
They say they're going to do something, they do it. So I'm not too. I wasn't thrown off track by the South African guy, but Kiko and all these guys are spinning it up, so that's fine.
So
it's a free country.
They're going to cut in. The very least, they'll cut into the dollars of business. Right. I mean, if they knock out 7, 8, 9, 10%. I think Reuters had an article that's 47% of world trade now and had Dr. Paul Craig Robertson. He says, not that many years ago was 90% of world trade. So it's been cut in half. What's going to happen? What's going to happen with this thing when they do announce it? If Lavrov is right, let's just say he is. What's going to happen?
Okay, so I told you what's not going to happen. It's not the end of the dollar. It's not the end of the euro. That's not going to happen. China and Russia are not going to have global reserve currency. That's not going to happen. And it's not going to be a new gold standard. That's not going to happen. So let's talk about what is going to happen. This new currency, and we don't even know the name of it. I call it a brick, one brick, right? But I don't know what they're going to call it. It really mimics what John Maynard Keynes was talking about at Bretton Woods in 1944. And remember, that was, to set the international monetary system of the post-World War II world. And there were 44 or so countries there, but there were only two that really mattered, the U.S. and the U.K. The dollar and sterling were the two leading reserve currencies at the time, and they were the victors in World War II, and they were going to call the shots. John Maynard Keynes represented the U.K. The U.S. was represented by a guy named Harry Dexter White, who was from the U.S. Treasury. But he wasn't the Secretary of the Treasury. That was Henry Morgenthau. But Harry Dexter White, ran the Bretton Woods negotiations. We learned later, and definitively from after the fall of the Soviet Union and some of the Venona cables, their files, their old KGB files were released, that Harry Dexter White was a communist agent. So the U.S. representative at Bretton Woods was a Stalinist agent whose mission was to destroy the British Empire. He did a pretty good job of it. But what Keynes wanted, what Keynes wanted, a world currency. He called it the Bancor, B-A-N-C-O-R. And he said, we're going to have basically a world central bank. That's what the IMF kind of became. And it's going to issue this global reserve currency, and all countries can have some access to it. It'll be gold-backed, and that'll be how we re-liquefy the world after World War II. The U.S. did not want that. The U.S. wanted the dollar to be the key to the whole thing. So what the U.S. said was the dollar will be linked to gold. So $35 an ounce, dollar to gold. Every other currency was not linked to gold. It was linked to the dollar. Huh. Now, if the dollar is linked to gold and your currency is linked to the dollar, then by a transitive law or indirectly, you're linked to gold. But the difference is that you can devalue against the dollar. So if you were in distress or you had trade deficits and you needed more liquidity and you were running low on reserves, et cetera, the IMF was set up to give you a bridge loan. So, hey, here's a bridge loan to pay your bills, make some policy changes, fix your problems, and get back to the game. But in cases where the deficit was persistent, the trade deficit was persistent, and they couldn't really do anything about it, you could devalue. But you devalued against the dollar. But the one thing that couldn't devalue was the dollar against gold. That was the anchor of the whole system. But what it did, it put the United States in the driver's seat because the U.S. controlled the IMF. Now, and that's what happened in 1971. We broke the dollar peg to gold was broken. That was one thing that wasn't supposed to happen. But the point is, Keynes' vision was for a true global currency tied to gold. That didn't happen. But that is what the BRICS have picked up on. This is what Sergei Lavrov was talking about a couple of months ago. They went down the same path that Keynes went down, because what Keynes did, before he got to gold, he wanted a commodity basket. So what's that? So it's, so many barrels of oil, so many bushels of corn, so many tons of copper, wheat, et cetera. There would be these leading commodities. You'd pick quantities and make a basket and figure out what that was worth. And that was what the Bancor was going to be worth. One Bancor equals one basket, and however many dollars that might happen to be. But Keynes realized that was impractical. Those commodities are not as generic as people think. Oil, yeah, kind of, it's a commodity, but there's 72 kinds of oil around the world based on sulfur content, viscosity, and other, you get transportation costs, insurance costs, and all that. And when you actually looked at the practicalities of it, and Keynes, above all, was a pragmatist. He was not an ideologue. He was a pragmatist. He said, it's really clunky and funky and hard to do. Why don't we just go to gold? Because gold is one thing, and gold is gold. It's an element. It's in the periodic table of the elements, atomic number 79. You don't have to debate if it's high sulfur gold or low sulfur gold. It's just gold, or it's not. But if it's gold, you know what you're talking about. So it wasn't that it was pretty and shiny and you can make jewelry out of it. It was that it was an extremely practical choice. And there also wasn't too much of it, but there wasn't too little either. It grew at a certain tempo, maybe roughly equal, not exactly, but roughly equal to how global output grows. And so it served all the purposes of money better than anything else. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it was better than anything else, and it eliminated all the problems with the commodity basket. So if you look at Keynes' papers, and I read them all, he said we're going to have a gold-backed world currency. And that was rejected by the U.S. Now, here we are, 2023. The BRICS have gone through the same path. They started, I follow this very closely, and this goes back a year or longer. They started with a commodity basket. And I read that. I said, you know what? They're going to have the same problem Keynes had. They're going to do this. They're going to research it. They're going to look at it, and they're going to end up with gold because they're just repeating the. And that's exactly what happened. They ended up with gold. So your bank, I'm calling it bank, or your BRIC, and whatever they call it, again, we don't know, it's going to be worth a certain weight of gold. And that's the key word, Greg, weight. Not a dollar equivalent, not an amount of some other currency, but a weight of gold. Now, is it 1 brick per ounce? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Is it 1 brick is worth a kilo of gold? Is 10 bricks worth 1 ounce of gold? I don't know. But it doesn't matter. It changes the math, but it doesn't change the construction and the substance of it. So 1 brick, if that's what they call it, and who knows, is going to be worth a certain quantity of gold, and it could be an ounce or it could be something different. Anyway.
It could be a thousandth of an ounce.
It could be a thousandth of an ounce, right? I mean, I'm thinking
10 thousandths of an ounce.
I mean,
right. I'm thinking 8 grams, maybe a quarter ounce, so 1 brick is worth $500. But I don't know. But I do know it doesn't matter. What does matter is that they're going to anchor it to a weight of gold. Now, here's the genius of the thing. And this is what all these other commentators buzzing around, yelling and screaming, don't understand. You can, the minute you say it's worth a certain weight of gold, now over here is a gold market. It traded in dollars. It's denominated in U.S. dollars, and it's huge. Gold futures, gold ETFs, London Bullion Exchange, et cetera. There's this giant gold market. It's all keyed to dollars. Now, people say, oh, well, the BRICS don't have enough gold to back up their currency. They're not going to. They have some gold, but they don't have enough to redeem their money supply for gold. Neither does the United States. Nobody does. but they're not. They don't have to. They're not going to do that. They're not promising to do that.